Hi, I'm Rusty Tanton with my co-manager host, Bresden O'Malley. This is the 101 Podcast, a podcast for software engineers. Our guest today is Elena Sayage, Talent Acquisition Specialist at Loyal Health. She will dispel some common resume misconceptions, offer some tips for selling yourself to recruiters, and share some stories about applicants she immediately knew would get offers and talk about what set them apart. Welcome, Elena.
Hello.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here, Elena. I'm
Hi.
excited. I actually met Elena because of an interview. She did my recruiting interview when I was applying to Loyal. And we just had such an amazing interview. I was floored by just the way she was able to connect to me, the way she was able to make me feel comfortable and be able to give her kind of out of the box, answers and thoughts that just popped into my head. I just felt instant connection with Elena, and we've become fast friends ever since that interview. And so I'm super excited to have you here, Elena. I was hoping you'd introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. My name's Elena. I've been in recruitment for about 7, going on 8 years. Started as an intern in 2016, working in manufacturing, and it was an insane time getting to know recruitment of hourly workers. And then I actually moved roles into like management co-ops. So I was hiring management development interns and co-op graduates to work in managerial positions and learning how to develop skills in leadership. And then recently, or not recently, 3 years ago, as of August 4th, actually yesterday was my 3-year anniversary at Loyal.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so I've been here ever since, working in talent acquisition for software engineers, and I've learned a lot. So
I'm actually really curious about manufacturing and why that was a crazy time, but we don't have to talk about that if you don't want to. But I'm just curious, kind of, why was it so crazy?
yeah, I can give you like a short tidbit. It's extremely high turnover. They're very, very hard jobs. It was aerospace manufacturing, so you're working with very, very tight tolerances. And when you're hiring someone from off the street who has zero background, zero experience, but is a quick learner and can pick things up, the training process is brutal, and people get cut in the 90-day period. It's usually a probationary period. Rework grinders were probably the hardest to hire for. We'd send them through boot camps, and it's tough because your customers are companies like Boeing and what are a few others? I'm forgetting now since it's been so long, but large aerospace manufacturer. GE,
Yeah.
Airbus. So just large manufacturers that put all these planes together. So they're manufacturing the turbines that are going to go in the engines of these airplanes. And sometimes they actually make weaponry for the military. So we're government contracted too. So we can't hire anyone who's, on drugs. Marijuana is a whole different story. But yeah, it was tough. It was really tough. But yeah, I learned recruiting then and learned how to source. And you couldn't find these people on LinkedIn. That was another thing. I mean, they weren't really on LinkedIn. They were on Indeed. They were on Facebook. They were on Craigslist. I mean, these were very hard to find people in the application process. And it was a very archaic system called Monster.
I
Like
remember
the
Monster. Yeah.
Monster job listings, they have an ATS system, and it was horrible. So yeah, it was tough, but I guess it gave me some skills to kind of navigate through that
That's
type of
fair.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I'm picking up on some of them, but then when you transition to, trying to interview for the tech industry, what were
yeah.
some of those key differences?
It was really, really hard. Actually, my first year working at Loyal was one of the hardest because I had no background, no knowledge of software engineering. I did not know it's funny, back in 2007, we were all on MySpace and working HTML and configuring backgrounds, and that's what I did. Like
Guilty.
I knew how to putting in your music and putting in code and configuring the very easy code. So it's like I had an idea of what engineers did, a very small idea. Um, and so yeah, it was really tough because I'm having to kind of grasp this idea where I'm working remotely, right? It's not like I can sit behind someone's computer and understand exactly what it is that you're doing. I mean, I guess we could do screen share, but it's still very hard to like quite understand that, pick that up. And so actually I learn a lot from candidates. So as I hear more about their backgrounds and the way that they've spearheaded projects or how they've contributed towards a project or towards the team, I have a better understanding of actually what the role is in general over time. So talking to more candidates helps me understand the role a lot more. I'm hiring a solutions architect right now, and that's a great example. I also a very hard role to kind of understand and grasp. If it never recruited for that type of role before. Yeah, it's a lot of trial and error in the beginning, but it requires a lot of listening and questions. So sitting down with hiring managers to better understand, the true needs of the role. But anyone can learn hard skills. Anyone can, if they're not super proficient in every single type of language, I feel like that's okay depending on the candidate, right? So if they have an energy that transcends their resume and transcends the interview, if they have um, the right attitude and they're super positive, they're eager, they're driven, they're hungry. I mean, you can teach that. And so that those folks, if say it's a hard role to fill and we have someone who has almost all the boxes, may not have like one pesky little requirement, sometimes we'll move forward with candidates who we know that can pick it up in the role, and that's ideal, right? A voting company, when companies pigeon hole themselves into an impossible scope, right? Where you're basically looking for a unicorn. You have to fill all of these boxes, and they have to have industry experience on top of it, or they have to have work in startup experience. Like when you add all these requirements, your pool gets significantly smaller. So what are you going to negotiate on? What are you going to compromise on? And so every hiring manager is different, but I find that I would rather hire someone or push someone forward who has the right attitude, who's eager, who's motivated, who's hungry, and really just wants other people to succeed. They want the product to succeed. They want to create an impact.
All right. So one follow-up I had for you, Elena, is um, has it changed for you how hard your requirements are for hard skills with the job market being a little bit down right now?
That's a really great question. I would say, yeah, it's hard to answer. One, because we haven't hired a software engineer since our layoffs. But I would I would say yes. Just because it's so like you'll be able to find the talent in the pool probably easier than you would have a couple years ago
Yeah.
when candidates were um, when it was a candidate market.
Yeah.
Now it's an employer market, and so it's easier for employers to find the candidates that they need and want. They can pick from their choosing because you'll have people who are interviewing, like seniors are interviewing for mids, and mids are interviewing for associates, and the list goes on. Or managers are interviewing for seniors. So employers are going to want to hire someone who obviously is more experienced, who could probably jump into a bigger role down the line, down the road. Um, so it is, in a sense, it is harder, but it depends on the role. So, for example, I'm looking for a two-in-one role because with with our current company, we're lean right now, and we could easily hire two different people for what we're trying to achieve with this solution architect, but because they're working on the customer success side and they need to manage implementations, you're asking for someone who's an implementations manager who's been an engineer,
Yeah.
essentially, a data engineer who understands data architecture. And that is pretty rare. You don't find a lot of those people unless they've become engineers and moved over to customer success or sales. And that doesn't happen very often. So, yeah, I mean, essentially the skills are essentially harder because you are having to find people who can do two positions and get paid a little bit more money. So, on top of that, depending on the company, depending on the size, depending on the budget, is the compensation within market. And that was another thing we were struggling with for a long time. We're a little bit more flexible now, which is good, but it seems to be the most common issue as I run into from company to company, even working in manufacturing. We hired supervisors, and this was back in 2017, $75,000 a year.
Ooh.
That's nothing compared to what managers make nowadays.
Yeah.
Engineering managers make double that. So it's definitely harder. So
Yeah, I can imagine. So, with all the hardship and everything kind of going on, and with how hard it is you're kind of looking for more in a
mhm,
single role,
yeah,
how does one sell themselves to recruiters and talent acquisition? And like, how do I
yeah,
stand out if I'm looking for a position?
yeah. I look at hundreds and hundreds of resumes, sometimes in one day, and it can take me. And I've looked at the average. I was thinking, am I the anomaly here? But no, the average is around anywhere between 6 and 30 seconds it takes for a recruiter to look through your resume, and hopefully you're having
Ooh,
a real human.
6.
6 seconds to 30 seconds. Yeah, it's quick. Because sometimes, real quickly, you'll see that they worked, a barista is applying for an engineer job. You'll see it. And this job requires at least 3 years of experience. So it's an easy no. Um, but yeah, that's the average. And so the biggest thing, there's a few things that I look at when I see a resume. I need to see that it's clear. I think what a lot of people try and do is they try to make it very fancy, different types of font, different colors, there's photos, there's hobbies, and I think that all of that is great and wonderful for a portfolio, but or maybe for LinkedIn, but in a resume, I need to see really, really quickly what have you done, what's your job title, what are the dates, right? I don't need years or just a year and to year. I need to see month, year. Um, because I see often 2016 to 2017, but that could be December 2016 to January 2017. So it's
Mm,
really nice to be pretty accurate with the employment time. Um, uh, uh, Anywhere I can find quick skills, right, or tech skills related to the role. I've noticed, and more people are including this in their resume, and I actually think, and I've been suggesting this to the people that I've provided resume work and help, is putting like the skills that you've learned in a specific position at the bottom of your most recent job. Just saying this is the skills that I've used total, because a lot of times we use a lot of different types of software and technology, and we have a lot of experience with it, but it, you may not have an opportunity to put it in a bullet point because those are usually used for achievements or accomplishments that you're super proud of where you've made an impact. Um, and more on that note, another thing I look for is a quick read of your bullet points. What have you been working on recently? Do you have the skills matched to the role? It Depending on the role, sometimes industry is almost a requirement. I know for some of our product managers, we need to have people who've worked in healthcare, who've worked on specific healthcare products, more specifically digital front door products. And so I look for a lot of keywords like chatbot or scheduling or patient or hospital or healthcare or health system. And I'm doing a lot of this manually, like control finding this. I'm not using AI to screen through all of this. I'm using my own eyeballs, and so it can take some time if it's a stronger candidate. And so it's just like it's a really quick breeze. And so I think one of the areas a lot of candidates fall short is it's not clear. It's hard to find. Maybe their professional experience starts on page 2. Um, Maybe it isn't well configured. Maybe they used an Indeed resume. I see that sometimes, which fine, but it's less competitive just in general. So take some time, put some effort into your resume, put some effort into how it's going to capture recruiter attention. Um, uh, a few other areas or impacts, but just quick off the bat, that's kind of what I see to really brand yourself. And for engineers, specifically for software engineers, they are super they're technical, they're engineers, and so they think what's practical, right? What am I going to just put on the page and put on the resume? Here are my skills, here's what I worked on, that's it. And I've noticed one of the more uh, significant resumes, or like software engineers where they can have the most impact on their resume, is by clearly showing and demonstrating impact. I think a lot of engineers have uh, they have a lot of really great um, explanations of what they've done and how they've used the technology, but rarely they talk about how it impacted the team, how it impacted the organization. A lot of them only talk about like here are the languages that I know, and that's it. You don't get to know anything else. Maybe they won't even talk about projects. Here are the languages that I've used. I'm proficient. Hire me. And that is really hard, because if I'm looking at one resume where it says here are the languages that I know, versus another candidate that has gone into detail around maybe they hit a goal for the team, for the company, and it resulted in a contract being secured for another few years because they worked on a project or an initiative that helped support that. So if engineers can demonstrate that more, and I do see engineers demonstrate this more, that is more of an incentive for me to move forward. But it depends on the market. So back 2 years ago, I could read that technical resume. It's like, I have this experience. Give me a call. I would have, right? But
Right.
now it's a little different, just because I have. I swear, if I back then 2 years ago, when I posted a software engineer, I would have around 200 to 300 resumes in 24 to 48 hours. I had 500 resumes for a PM product manager role recently today. So I'm thinking about if I were to post an engineer today, I'd probably receive at least 3 to 500 within 48 hours. And so yeah, you have to compete with other people, and how to do that is to demonstrate, here's what I know and here's how I can create an impact at your organization.
Yeah, one point I heard you mention was I heard you talk about second pages of resumes. I know that's a
Yeah.
very common piece of resume advice I hear is like keep your resume to one page, keep your resume to one page. How true does that hold for you?
Um, I would say it used to be true back when you would physically go into an interview and hand someone your resume, and it would have a staple in it because you had 2 pages, and people don't want to flip through that. And so that's where the whole conception of keep your resume within a page.
Mm.
So when you go into interviews, you don't have to have the interviewer flip through your pages. So it's easy and concise all on one page. Nowadays, where we're not doing on-site interviews clearly as much. It's mostly remote. It wouldn't it's not, it doesn't hurt you to have 2 pages, in my opinion. I can't say the same for all recruiters. If they hold people to a 2 page or to a page quota, um, but I don't hold it. We've hired people who've had, I think, even almost close to 3 pages, and they're phenomenal employees. And so I don't think it hurt. it hurts you anymore. Now, if it is like pretty, 3 pages or 4, I've seen 11 pages. I think I've counted up to
What?
20 on one. And
That's a push.
uh, I mean, that's 30 years of experience, and then going into detail on every single job, right? These are people who are, yeah, have been in the industry a lot longer, and may not know the the ways that you can concise it. But yeah, 2 pages is totally fine in my opinion. It can be pretty tough to concise to 1 page, especially if you have at least 10 years of experience and you want to be able to demonstrate
Yeah.
the impact around each role. Um, and even putting in your educations, your certifications, all these extra
Mhm.
tidbits that are important to your credentials, to your candidacy, to your competitiveness. Being able to put that all on 1 page is pretty tough unless you want to have point 0.6 font.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I've
What do you
my
do when you find a resume with point 0.6 font? Can you read
I've
that?
had I've had resumes where they concised it to 2 pages. It was extremely small font, the smallest font I've ever seen, and it goes from one page to the like other, like it's the whole page. There's no space. It's just the whole length of the page. And typically we don't move forward with those candidates, or I don't at least, because while actually they're more consistent with contractors. I'm not sure why, but they're very consistent with contractors or people who've worked in DevOps. I'm not sure. It seems to be the theme that I've seen. I don't
It's
know.
funny.
But every time I hire a DevOps engineer or I'm looking for one, I get a bunch of contractors that smallest font possible across the entire page, and it's long, right? It's like 2-3 pages of contractor experience, and it's not always the most competitive.
Now, another piece of resume advice I've heard that sounds kind of sus to me, honestly, is the white texting thing. Have you heard about this? Where they tell you put the white text at the bottom of the page so that like you don't actually see it when it's printed out, but it quote unquote beats the ATS, which probably is a whole other question by itself. Is that really a thing, beating ATS?
It is it is a thing.
Yeah,
Actually, because I use control find to find keywords in a resume, I was looking and it's been more common, a little bit disappointing actually. I did control find and I found health, 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 all in the white space page of a resume. And what it did, it completely disqualifies the
yeah,
candidate because you essentially were dishonest with your
yeah,
experience by putting it in the white space of this page of your resume. I put in product, even more key terms, and so it is really disappointing. It's more disappointing with kind of the state of the world right now, the state of the economy. Like people are doing everything that they can
yeah,
to get seen and to get a recruiter call. So if I have a lot of empathy for these people, but at the same time, it's a recruiter can find it like I did, and it can immediately disqualify you, because it was it's a
yeah.
dishonest tactic,
I
and you have
heard.
to be okay with that. It's a risk, right? A risk that employers may not move forward with you because they find that out. Um, and yeah, I just see it as being dishonest versus trying to game a system.
Yeah,
ATSs, what I've seen for the last 7-6 years that I've been recruiting, is that when I PDF find or like a control find for specific words in a resume, AIs are doing the exact same thing. That's how they find keywords. It's so simple. And so as long as your resume is a PDF where it's easy to read, it's um I've never seen font being an issue. Um you don't need to put keyword like
Mhm.
specific keywords behind your behind in white text. Be honest with your or be honest with your industry experience. Be honest with your skill sets, um, and find opportunities to include keywords maybe in your resume that you may not have thought of before. Right? Talk about how you've used technology and how it's created an impact versus generalizing your experience of saying I have good communication skills or I worked on this project and and it's good for the team, or very generalized statements. Try to specify exactly what you did, what technology you used in order to create this impact, in order to where it impacted this specific result, for specific users. I think a lot of engineers specifically struggle, or they forget to include the user. Now, I've seen a lot of I've talked to a lot of freelance engineers, and their whole brand relies on the user experience, relies on user feedback, whether it works or not. And so it's very similar in the sense that if you're working with an engineer at even at a large company, you should have some sort of understanding of what impact it's having on the user. Who is your user? Who are they? Right? What are their backgrounds? What's important to them? Why are you doing this specific project? Why is this going to help them? And if engineers fail to understand the user, or they never took a minute to understand the user, it doesn't usually translate to a resume. It's very generalized. And I see the stronger the engineer, the more detailed they are with the impacts that they've made, who their audience is, who their customers are. They have a better business understanding around all the different types of teams, cross-functional teams, including customer success and sales and design and product management. And they're curious, right? These are curious developers who desperately and eagerly want to help people, right? And a lot of the solutions developers develop nowadays are to help people do whatever they need to be successful.
So one thing I wanted to follow up on is you mentioned gaming the system.
Hmm.
So I hear this a lot from developers who are applying to a lot of positions today because they're having a really hard time getting their resume noticed just to
Yeah.
get their first interview with you, Elena, like the
Yeah.
interview into the door.
Yeah.
Um, there are all of these hoops that it feels like you have to go through, like answering specific questions on why do you want to apply here?
Yeah.
What industry knowledge do you have? What makes you a fit for this job while they're giving you their resume?
Mhm.
And if there's fatigue around submitting,
Mhm.
are are you getting weird answers to that? Or, like, what does that look like on your side? Because it also sounds like you have a lot of fatigue with how many applications you're having to, um, just comb through and view yourself. So there's fatigue on both sides. So I'm
Yeah.
curious if it's gaming the system as we're applying, that's what we view it as, you know?
Mhm.
Like, what does that feel like on your side that they're trying to game you or
Mhm.
just trying to get their foot in the door? Like, what does that mean for you in your position?
Yeah. We have a few application questions in our application process, and then we actually send out a pre-screening questionnaire um, if they're a good fit, a competitive person to move forward with. And this is so we can capture a few things. Interest is a big one.
Mm.
And that's a really hard, what I'm realizing now, it's a hard uh currency because a lot of candidates are very tired. They're tired of
Yeah.
getting rejected. They're tired of applying. They're tired of answering meaningless questions that, quite frankly, don't apply to them. And so I take a lot of empathy when I read some of the questions that I see. I really just want to know, do you care enough to answer a little bit of the question? I don't need to see a full blown essay. I don't need to see you talking about how this has impacted you personally. It would be great, but I don't need that. I just need to know, are you an authentic, genuine, real person behind the computer who's not just
Mm.
spam applying, and you don't know who you're applying to? Um, from personal experience, I've screened candidates who would ask me to tell them about my company, like tell me who you are within the first like 2 seconds of answering. Like, who is this company? Like, they don't even
Yeah.
know who they're talking to. And so there's a lot of reasons why companies do this is because they just want to understand, do you know what you're applying for? Do you know who you're applying for? Because, and quite frankly, it happens a lot. Candidates apply, they jump into a position and then they hate it and they jump out. Companies
Mm,
don't want to deal with that. They don't want to backfill this role. And they also don't want to take too many calls because it's very cumbersome and tiring to talk to a lot of candidates. They don't, especially now, their recruiting teams are cut. A lot of them are. They
Yeah.
probably have one or two max.
mm,
And so you can't call everyone. You want to, you can't. Um, so I do see a lot of candidates using AI to answer a lot of these questions, what
mm,
some might call gaming. I don't think it's called gaming. I think it's being creative. I think
mhm,
you're trying to utilize your time and be efficient and trying to have a tool to work for you. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that if you're not copying and pasting verbatim from ChatGPT. I see a lot of that, and I usually can tell pretty quickly if it's pasted verbatim from ChatGPT.
mhm,
They recently included a feature, I don't know how recent, where you can just upload documents and it say, hey, review the uploaded document and then review this job description. So people can upload their resume, can be able to review it and then make a lot of similarities and distinctions and help them craft compelling cover letters. And again, nothing wrong with that as long as it sounds like it's coming from you. I think the issue with AI generated text is that I don't know who I'm talking to. I'm
Yeah.
talking to a
mhm,
robot. I hear it's a robot speaking to me, but I don't hear that it's a specific person. And so that's where it gets really, really hard in terms of understanding someone's personality. And so I actually have used ChatGPT and I've taken out a lot of tidbits where it just doesn't sound like me. It's words that I'll never use ever in a conversation. I'll include, personal stuff and, save that as a template and then modify it per company. Um, and but I also I it is really, really, really hard applying over and
yeah.
over and
It
over again.
is.
So it's hard to give that advice knowing that, I am still employed. I'm not unemployed and I haven't been in a space where all I'm doing 8 to 5 is applying to jobs, or maybe not even 8 to 5, maybe like 7 to 10 p.m. at night where you're
Yeah,
just
I have to
nonstop.
cut myself off at about 4 hours a day because if I do any more
Yeah,
than that, it drives me crazy. I do
it
have
does.
a question for you. How closely do you read cover letters? Because
Mm,
I know with all the applications coming in,
Hmm.
um, it seems like it would be hard to read all those cover letters.
Yeah, yeah. I like reading cover letters, especially if they don't meet if they don't check all the boxes.
mm,
Sometimes cover letters and candidates, I think that understand the gaps. There are some candidates where there are no gaps. I'm a perfect fit. Hire me immediately. There's nothing wrong with me. I can do this job in my sleep kind of candidate. And so not everyone's perfect. And if you believe you're perfect for a job, then I don't want to hire you anyway because I need someone who has a little bit of healthy doubt going into a job, knowing that there are some things I'm going to learn in here. There are some things I'm going to develop here. Um, and so cover letters help fill in the gaps, right? So if there's any gaps in your resume compared to the job description, or even compared to the industry or um, any
mhm,
skills or technology, that is your opportunity to talk about what you can bring to the table and how you can fill in that gap. Examples where you have learned a new skill in a role that you were required to learn on the spot. It gives you an opportunity to sell yourself. And
Yeah.
I like reading cover letters because it does fill in those gaps. If I did see gaps in the resume, um, in terms of skills, but it doesn't make or break. Usually, it's usually just a cherry on top. I know that some employers are requiring cover letters, which I don't really like. I think that's a hard ask of candidates to always submit a cover letter, but that might be to reduce their candidate volume.
It's by far the most exhausting part of the process for me is dealing with cover letters. And I
Yeah.
will confess, like I I mean, I have ChatGPT write my first draft. There's a couple
Yeah.
of paragraphs in there that always show up that sound like a robot that I immediately take out, and then I try to
Mhm.
add a couple of sentences that sound more human in there, and then
Mhm.
that's about as much energy as I can put into a cover letter right
Yeah.
now.
Yep.
Um, it's I think I'm up to about 150 applications in 4 months right now, which is just,
Mhm.
and I would say about
Exhausting.
130 of those required cover letters. It's
Mhm.
such a relief when I when I see one that does not require a cover letter where it's a
Mhm.
question, because,
Mhm.
and I feel like there, like you said, to your point, what you said
Mhm.
earlier, there's a lower expectation that you're going to write a novel in
Mhm.
there, that if you can just write a couple of
Yeah.
sentences showing that you read the company's core values, or
Yeah.
something that you at least show
Yeah.
you know what you're applying for.
Yeah.
That's so much better than trying to put cover letters on there as a candidate anyway.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes it's, to demonstrate your interest, sometimes it's not enough for some employers. I know that I've heard some success stories. It's rare, actually, because recruiters get flooded with them, but reaching out, if you can find the hiring manager for a specific
Mm.
job on LinkedIn, always reach out to a hiring manager, reach out to that, or
Mm.
reach out maybe to their peer, or reach out to the peer of that role if possible, saying, "Hey, I applied. I'm really interested. Here are my credentials. Attach a resume." Boom, done. You can
Mm.
only have so much text in a quick DM, I think, unless you have LinkedIn Premium, and and even then, you only get so many DMs, I think, with LinkedIn Premium. Um, so people do take the extra initiative to submit their resumes to people in the company to get quickly seen and more vetted. And I will say it actually is more successful. I am more likely to call a candidate, even if they don't match all the boxes. They they took an initiative that I didn't ask of them,
Mm.
and that kind of demonstrates their eagerness and and how hungry they are, um, and maybe they would demonstrate in the role.
So I do have another LinkedIn question, because this has been kind of a hot button topic, the open to work thing. Like,
Mhm.
I see a lot of people saying you look thirsty if you put your open to work on there, but I also see, I've seen a lot of recruiters say, no, 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 please, that's going to tell me that you're open to work, and that's a helpful thing to know.
Yeah, I think he honestly used to have the impression that someone was desperate, or not desperate's the wrong word. Uh, uh, maybe a negative impression for some recruiters. They'd rather, maybe recruiters would rather hire passive candidates that are happily employed, that are needed and wanted at their employer, and they're wanting people who they want those people. They want they want the employed people. They don't want people who are unemployed. I think that used to be the case. Which is unfortunate. But I think now it's been more widely accepted by recruiters and by hiring managers to welcome the open to work banner. Again, I can't speak for every recruiter
Yeah,
and every
yeah.
hiring manager who may have a different opinion. But from what I've noticed is people are less, I've seen some stories where people were less likely to get recruiters to reach out to them when they had the open to work banner. And then as soon as they removed it, they suddenly got more recruiter and messages and um, wanting them to apply to their positions. And so it's hard to say. I'm glad that it's been more widely accepted. I think that should be the case. Um, but I think back in the day, maybe when there was someone who's been unemployed for, let's say it's been a year or two, and they just can't get any job anywhere, and recruiters wonder often, they wonder why. Why is it so hard for this person to get back into the workforce? Why aren't they competitive? Why haven't they got a job yet? And so there are some recruiters that just pass on them because if everyone else did,
Yeah,
which is it's sucky to say, but I think maybe that's the reality for for back then. So
that's fair.
yeah.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's just not easy right now, but doesn't make your job easier that there's one of you. Most companies have cut back on even those resources. Yeah.
Here's another
Yeah.
LinkedIn follow-up. I can't remember if Loyal did Easy Apply or not. Do you have any experience with Easy Apply?
I hate EasyApply. I think it's great if your company is only using EasyApply to gather resumes. It's a cheaper way for them to basically filter through resumes. It's funny as a recruiter, I that's the only thing I look for is like, how are you gathering resumes? Because if I know if I get this job, that's going to be what I'm doing. And so I try to take into consideration of the ATS systems that they use and what their process is, even how the job description is even architected, like how descriptive are they in their job descriptions, and sometimes it's an area of opportunity. But I digress. Easy Apply is fine, but I always recommend if you're going to use Easy Apply, check the job careers page and see if that job is posted on
Yeah,
their actual page and apply there too. Do two applications if you must, because sometimes they'll get emails whenever someone does apply directly to their email. They can quickly see your like a quick snapshot of your LinkedIn. Um, and they'll get an attachment of your resume, but it's so easy to get uh, uh, not seen.
yeah,
Essentially, you become lost pretty quickly in the shuffle, especially if you're having over 1 to 2 to 300 candidates apply. I've actually been trying to be really on top of sending rejections on time, like within a certain time frame after they apply, and trying to export people to ATS because that's a whole other thing. Is that once they get their resume, it's not like they're in their ATS system. You have to export them, upload their resume physically, and then usually have to send them more application questions to fill out because they only did an easy apply
yeah,
process. So, um, yeah,
So it's not easy on your side if they
yeah.
used Easy Apply.
exactly. It's actually harder to be able to organize and filter and search.
Mhm.
So, but
Yeah.
it's easy for the candidate. You
Well,
just
easy for the candidate, but not really effective, at least from
Mhm.
my personal anecdotal experience, right? Like, I mean, I can
yeah,
go through, I started out doing some easy applies just to see if I would get any traction with them, and
hmm
I've almost entirely stopped doing them because they never
yeah,
get through ever. And to your
no,
point, like I try to look for the application, like I try to go to the website and see if I can find where the
hmm
listing is and try to apply through there instead of through easy apply.
yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I've actually had more success applying through archaic systems, like archaic
Yeah.
applications, because no one else is going to do it. So if I
Yeah,
do it, then I'm the only, like, maybe like I'm one of the best qualified
Yeah.
candidates in this pool.
right. You can figure this thing
So
out.
yeah, so I'm competitive by applying with a stupid application system. Boom. Gotcha. Gotcha other candidates that didn't want to take the time to apply. So,
No, I mean,
it's one way.
as much as I really dislike as a candidate when I find a process that's like 7, 8, 9 pages long, I do find I get more responses to those because clearly not as many candidates are going to go all the way through that process.
No, they will not. I mean, it's hard for me to do that. Um, and so it can be that can be a one way to get more traction. Um, but the problem is that there's a lot of these new ATS systems like Lever and Greenhouse, and there's a few more that make it very easy just to submit your resume and that's it. More and more companies are including more like questions in the early on, to I saw one application where it had like interview questions embedded into the application, and you really have to ask yourself, and it's kind of nice for some people, where it forces them to think about, okay, is this something I really want? Is this the job that I really want to apply
Mhm.
for? And sometimes I have found myself removing myself from from applications because I don't want to have to go through this whole process because I just don't care enough. Now, for some people, they do care enough and they do have the experience, and it is easy to answer these questions. It also helps prep you. So, another thing that candidates often don't think about
Mhm.
or maybe consider is that when you fill out application questions or even pre screening questions before a screening call, you are already getting an insight look to what kind of questions they're going to ask you in a screening call. In fact, a lot of them are very similar and in similar scope. So you've already done your homework ahead of time, which I know sucks knowing that you might not get even a screening call, but
Yeah.
it can help you prepare for other jobs. It helps you prepare for your next job, for maybe for your next interview, if you're applying within the same scope anyway.
How do you know within those 6 to 30 seconds that you have looked at a resume and you know this is a solid candidate and you're ready to move forward? Or does that happen more often during the first interview?
Mhm. Um, yeah, if they have industry experience, if they've worked on similar solutions, similar to what we build, if they have similar customers, if they're coming from a competitor, if they worked in the same technology, that can usually indicate a slam dunk. Um,
Mhm.
Plug and play is another word for it. But you
Mm.
don't really know if they're a good fit until you talk to them. And usually
Mhm.
I can know that in the first, well, gosh, for some candidates, I know if they're like we must hire within the first 5 minutes. I usually know like we must hire this person. They're going to be an amazing fit. They align with our values. They align with, and I don't like to say culture fit. I like to say culture addition. So is this someone that can, be a positive addition to the team who can bring in some new ideas, but is super humble and empathetic and human centered. And you usually get a really good sense of that in the first 5 minutes. Um, I don't know how to describe it. Um, uh, maybe it's personality, but it's there's certain people who can mesh with anyone, right? Who can talk to anyone, who can uh, uh, be able to lead anybody. And those it usually happens with managers. Engineers are a little harder, right? Because they're very much in their within their scope and more tech driven, obviously. But I need to know, can they carry on a conversation? Can they, can they tell me about their team and how they contribute to the team? And every engineer's different with that answer, but usually I can know in the first 5 minutes, especially for leaders. And maybe that's because I've interviewed and almost like essentially helps develop a lot of leaders working for our MDP program, management development program, in the past, and helping tech focused people become leaders. What skills do you need? How do you carry on a conversation, and how do you demonstrate your experience in a quick 5 minutes that translates to not only to this role because they did their homework, but also they're charismatic about it and they're real. I think that's a big thing. They're just real.
Mhm.
They're authentic and genuine, and they're not trying to super sell you. They're just trying to tell you, this is what I've done, and I'm proud of it. I'm humbled by it, and I'm excited to hear more about this, and they're just genuine. So there was a few people that we've hired at Loyal where I had that in the first 5 to 10 minutes. Your previous guest was one of them, Billy. He was
Definitely.
amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, I knew within the first 5 minutes he was going to be great. And then another person. So, and it's very rare. It does not happen often. But when it does, it's one of the reasons I like being a recruiter is that you are able to meet some really, really cool but
Mhm.
smart people, smart, genuine, empathetic people who just want to create something cool with us essentially. So
I'll second that about Billy as well. Like, Bresden, you and I both interviewed him, and
Yep,
we
we
both were
did.
like, we got to hire this guy.
He was amazing, and it was,
yeah.
my very first interview at Loyal, and I had done tons of interviews at another company,
Hmm.
and I didn't even know how to score him because he was so good. I just thought this company had a different level of interviewees coming through,
Yeah.
until I had some more interviews, and I was like, "Oh, no, that was one of the best
Yeah, no, they're
interviews
not
I've
all that
ever
good.
done."
I
No.
don't
Yeah.
think he even knows that I've said that. Like, I don't think I've even said that to him personally. But yeah, I call it interview performance, call it, um, the ability to communicate your experience really, really, really well. I don't know if that's a specific skill, but there are certain people who uh, can demonstrate that very well. Because what happens, with some candidates, maybe I would venture to say most, is that they they didn't build enough. It's something, maybe it's more of my job, right? But it's really great if a candidate can do their homework on the job description, usually the night before, and
Mm,
really try to understand what are the transferable skill sets between my resume and this job description. What is
Yeah.
this job really demanding? What are the solutions that they're building? What are the products that they're building? How would I create an impact? What's been the company history? What are the backgrounds of similar people who've been hired in this role? So sometimes what I'll do, and when I used to do this when I was interviewing, is if there were other recruiters at that company, I'd want to know their backgrounds. Where did they come from? Um, and it helps me understand like this bigger picture around the job and even the culture. And so that can help prep me going into the screening interview, where at one, I have questions, but two, I can easily bridge my experience into the role, but
mhm,
also taking a step back and knowing when you don't have experience in that area and calling it out. I think a lot of candidates are afraid of doing that because they fear that it's going to immediately disqualify them. In fact, I think it does the opposite. When you call out your areas, I call them areas of opportunity or weaknesses. I don't like to say weaknesses, but more so, where can I grow? Where can I develop? Um, that tells me, one, you did your homework. Two, you understand where you fall short and where you want to grow. And that speaks volumes, always, always. And I'd rather have someone who's honest about areas like that versus being dishonest with, um, oh, I really know JavaScript. Okay, well, tell me about how you know JavaScript. Well, I used it once in school. Right? So it's like you find out pretty quickly that, like, no, you don't actually have like professional experience in JavaScript, or you used it day to day, you used it in school, and sure, that gets you so far, but it doesn't really transcend to this role.
mhm.
And sometimes it can, depending on the role, if it's an associate or maybe entry level,
Yeah,
but
and I just love that you wanted to come on to this. I
Yeah.
think that it's incredibly relevant. Um, most of most of my conversations with anyone in engineering right now is around interviewing and their
Yeah.
resume and the current state of everything, even when they have a job,
Yeah.
right?
mhm.
So I think that this is just incredibly relevant. And what I love about our conversation today is that it really um, hu- humanized your position and
Yeah.
what you're doing. You're this almost this gate to us trying to get an interview, right? And then trying to get through that first interview. And to know that you're a human and the trials and the tribulations you're going through really helps to just know go into this interview and be yourself, and that's the best you can do. You're not an enemy. I'm not trying to game this weird system just to try to get my foot in the door. And I just really appreciate that. I think that that might even ease minds while going into an interview to just remember that I'm actually just speaking to a human. It's okay. I
Yeah.
don't have to be so worried. So I really appreciate your time today. And
Yeah.
Rusty, I don't know if you have any closing statements either, but I know you're going through this right now, so I'm hoping
Yeah.
maybe my statement is close to true.
Yeah, no, I don't have a whole lot to add to that. I'll just thank you, Elena, for coming on. I th this whole process, this market is hard for everybody. It's hard for the people
Mhm.
reading the resumes. It's hard for the people submitting the resumes. It's hard for the
Yeah.
people who were left behind after a layoff and trying to do the work of two or three people because half of their team just got cut. I mean, it's hard
Yeah.
for everybody.
I was gonna say the biggest thing that I would, advise all job seekers out there is to network your heart out.
Mm.
I know that the application process is very time consuming. You could probably even save yourself an application by reaching out to people at the company just to see if they are hiring, to see if your resume would be a good match for any of their positions.
Yeah.
And it's not really about who you know, but it's who knows you. I
Yeah.
see a lot of success stories with
Mm.
people who've leveraged their network, and have helped them get jobs and get above the entire pool of candidates and get quickly through the interview process. So, hold strong for everyone who's still out in the market looking for a job. You're not alone. A lot of people are in the same boat, but um, in addition to that, leverage resources to boost your resume. Try to understand the job, the company, but more importantly, where do you create an impact?
Yeah.
Where do you want to? I used to work at Disney, so it's where do you want to create magic?
There you go.
And
I like
yeah,
it.
I'll leave it at that.
Opinions expressed on the one-on-one belong only to us and our guests, not to any of our respective employers. You can find us on the web at acast.com/THE1ON1. You can also find us in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartMusic, and YouTube by searching for The One-on-One. Please rate and review us on those services. It helps us out a lot. The One-on-One wouldn't be possible without listeners like you and a fantastic community of people who help us in ways large and small. Special thanks to Cameron Cooper, who helps us with marketing, Michael Ducharme, who created our bumper music, and Elena Sayage, who's been a huge booster from day one. Thanks for listening.